What happens when you have spiky, unpredictable workloads and you need to scale to maximize price and performance? You can't hire enough people to scale with your growth. And that's when BigQuery additions and autoscaling come into play. And today, Bennett, who's the CTO of Climate Engine, is going to share with us his experience, his best practices. And so, Bennett, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Let's start at the top. What does Climate Engine do?
Yeah, thank you, Bruno, for having me. Climate Engine and our flagship product, SpatiaFi, produces climate risk insights for financial institutions. So we cover the basics like flood, drought, fire, anything that may be affecting the buildings, properties that a financial institution has interest in over the next 5, 10, 50 years.
And what's the size of data that we're dealing with here? I mean, I'm assuming that Earth data is pretty massive.
Yeah, so last I checked, the Earth got imaged about 7 times per day. So this is satellites going around the Earth, taking pictures of the entire Earth 7 times a day. So there's a massive influx of data coming in that climate scientists, and our team included, need to really distill into actionable insights like, is my transmission line going to catch on fire in the next 10 years? So that is a huge data processing. We also deal with a number of multinational companies. So we're talking about looking into the risk for buildings across maybe 500 million buildings around the world.
So imaging the Earth 7 times a day, that's got to be billions of records. So I'm assuming that you're using the Enterprise Plus edition of BigQuery?
No, actually with BigQuery editions, we're using the standard edition and its autoscaling feature. Before using standard, we had some dedicated slots, the fixed number of workers on BigQuery, but our workload is very spiky. What I mean by that is that when our scientists produce a new forecast, we're going to want to run that forecast over all the properties of all of our clients as quickly as possible. And that means a huge increase in our workloads for a relatively short amount of time. With even the entry-level edition, our main use case is the autoscaler. So we can throw our workload at BigQuery and have BigQuery manage the number of slots and allocation to our query job, run through that job, and scale down when we're done. So we're not paying for what we don't use.
So that's really quite amazing, because by switching from on-demand to editions, you got a few values out of the switch, right? You got predictability, you've got reliability, because you know that it's capacity that's available to you, and you get intelligence where it's following your usage. You know, when you look at the cost savings, I know it's kind of difficult to tell the before and after. How do you think about how you're saving money with this new system?
Yeah, part of my role at Climate Engine is to look at kind of how we monitor resourcing and including staffing across our entire technology stack. So what happened with BigQuery is BigQuery came out with the additions and this auto-scaling feature right around the time when we were really picking up usage of BigQuery. And like I mentioned, our spiky workloads, if we didn't have an autoscaler, that would frankly mean more work on Climate Engine's part to scale up the number of slots before a big job and make sure it's scaled down, or to monitor our workload queues to make sure that they were going through quickly enough. And all of this meant either hiring someone to do this more or less manually or writing code that did it. And if we write code for auto-scaling our own workloads, then we're basically introducing the risk of more bugs and putting more burden on our developers. So really the way that I see kind of the cost savings from additions and the auto-scaling is that it's saved us hiring somebody to deal with that.
Now with additions, you also got additional capabilities like notifications and the ability to have remediation. So how do you use that today in comparison to what you were using before with the on-demand capabilities?
Yeah, so whenever you introduce auto-scaling to really any cloud technology, you run the risk of maybe scaling beyond your capabilities. And I might mean that in a financial way, but I also mean that in downstream processors. So if one part of your pipeline can scale up and do a huge data dump to your downstream, I mean, you're not really getting the benefits of that if your downstream is not also scaling up. you can't just throw autoscaling at a problem and say, this fixes it. You need to consider how you autoscale, so within certain parameters. And with BigQuery and the additions, we're allowed the ability to monitor our jobs and set caps on how high things scale. And also, I also see it as a huge plus to working with the rest of the Google ecosystem. We leverage GKE Autopilot a lot, which essentially autoscales your Kubernetes. And by having those two work in conjunction, we're scaling each part of the cloud that we need to use as needed. They work together, they scale up if needed, they both scale down if needed. And we aren't clobbering one with a massive data influx, because with both systems autoscaling, like I said, we have less code to manage, less cloud resources to manage, and frankly, less cost because we're not using the allotted slots.
So you talked about best practices here for how you're able to scale. When you go from on-demand to autoscaling, what are the first few things you need to do?
Yeah, so I mentioned one of the gotchas earlier, which is cost. And what that means is that when you first introduce autoscaling to BigQuery, you should set a base and a maximum number of slots that are allotted to you. And in that way, you know more or less the maximum cost that it's going to cost you. And it scales within those parameters, so there's no surprises. The other kind of gotcha of introducing autoscaling to any system is that this should work as a pipeline with other systems that you have. You may not get the benefits of autoscaling and having access to so many workers or slots in BigQuery if your downstream processes can't handle that influx of data. So I find that any autoscaling system works best when your entire pipeline autoscales. So just like we introduced autoscaling to BigQuery, we also heavily use GKE Autopilot for essentially autoscaling our Kubernetes cluster and any other data processing we may need to do outside of BigQuery.
Outstanding. So you're using intelligence across your entire data cloud. Bennett, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your best practices here. If people want to find out more about Climate Engine and your products, where should they go?
The best place to go is SpatiaFi.com. SpatiaFi is our premier product for spatial and financial insights, and you can check out more there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Until next time, I'm Bruno Ziza.